From the New York City area, welcome to the Badass Counseling Show, where the master badass himself, Sven takes you deep and gives balm for the soul, baby.
Hello. Welcome to the Badass Counseling Show. This is a lightning round. Wherever you are today, from Mississauga to Mississippi, not just the state, but the river. You could be at the headwaters up in Lake Itasca, Minnesota, of the mighty Mississippi River. Wherever you are, it's great to have you joining us on this show. I am here in studio with KC, the lovely and talented over in the booth, and really the creative brain behind all of this, and Rob, the technical wizard, and always an inspiration for me. Rob the Rocket sitting next to me. I'm Sven Erlandson. Rob, what say ye?
They're in from all over for you, Sven. I'm very excited. Ready to go.
Yes, this is great. I've even got Lori in from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and Hallie from Wisconsin. Great to have everyone here. We're starting off with a question from Jonathan. Tricky little question. What's the difference between intuition and fantasy? And how do I know which to follow and when? I believe that great things start as fantasy. I believe that great things that we want to do with our lives or become start as a fantasy, start as a dream. And so that's sort of like the meta point. That's the SR-71 spy plane level. That's sort of where we're shooting. Now, every day we're down in the trenches, right, of life, whether it's in relationships or in work or what have you. And you're operating then from this place of what feels right moment to moment. But here's the trick, Jonathan. You can't know what you're feeling in the moment, what you're called to do in each moment, if you have lots of other voices and lots of other influences and conditioning inside of you. And the truth is, all you really have to do to parse out the difference there, or to not know which to follow and when, is get out all the voices that cause you to doubt you, to dive down to the origin sources of what you were taught about yourself, the crap you were taught about yourself. Maybe it's that you shouldn't trust your voice, or you're no good, or you make big mistakes, or you're unlovable. And that, of course, is what the book is for. There's a hole in my love cup. You can get it at my website, badasscounseling.com. But it's to help you begin to get that crud out of you. And the more you do that, you won't even have to think about, well, should I listen to this? Should I do that? You'll just know, because it's coming from a very different place. Next question. Over on Facebook, how long could narcissistic abuse damage possibly last? Well, it could last forever. Could. If you don't ever do the work of going into that damage, if you don't ever do the work of feeling that pain and mining it and disassembling it and rooting it out of you, it will infect the rest of your life. There's just no question about it. But see, this is the trick. And I know that sounds heavy, and it's like, oh, fuck, now I'm stuck with it forever. Thanks, Sven, you fucking grim reaper. No, it means you have control of whether or not you can get it, whether or not you live with it or not. But you have to do the work. This shit doesn't magically heal itself, whether it's narcissistic abuse or any other type of abuse, or whether it's being ignored or feeling unloved or a relationship breakup or the death of your, brother, whatever it might be. Until that pain and the bullshit beliefs you were taught about yourself and the fears, until those are out of you, they're still in you. So you are very much in control of how long that sort of aftermath and all the crud of narcissistic abuse, in your case that you're talking about, or any other type of crud, grief or what have you, how long it's in you. You are in control of that. All right, next question. Rain asks the question, how does an adult child of a parent abuse work through their triggers at work? How does an adult child of a parent abuse, okay, so my parent abused me, I'm an adult now, got it. Work through their triggers at work. Well, to be very, very honest with you, just for clarity's sake, you're not actually working through the triggers while you're at work. And I think you knew that, but for clarification for our listeners, you're not doing the work at work per se. But what you're saying is I'm being triggered at work. And so how do I sort through that stuff when I'm the adult child of a parent of abuse? What has to be done is you have to go inside of the abuse that happened when you're a child. And it's very possible that you have been avoiding those feelings, that pain, those memories, all or most of your life. Would that be a reasonable assessment? Because usually it is. That we don't want to touch it. It's too painful, too thought-provoking, too stimulating, too overwhelming. And so then what happens is all of that stuff that was done to you, the memories of what was done, but also the emotional charges attached to those memories, those sit inside of you like sticks of dynamite. Every one of those emotionally charged memories is a stick of dynamite. And anything that might trigger you is like a match or a lighter. It can light that stick of dynamite and all of a sudden, boom. Or maybe it's not even a dynamite. Maybe it's a bunch of firecrackers and they're going pop, 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 pop inside of you when you get quote unquote triggered. So therefore, the long-term solution, and as you folks know, I'm not big on coping. Yes, there are times when you got to cope, but if you're still coping, you're not healed. And I'm all about the healing so that the coping becomes superfluous, unnecessary after a point. Anyway, the point is in your spare time, you are going down inside of that very stuff that you've likely been running from your whole life. And in about chapter 3, I think it is, of the book, There's a Hole in My Love Cup, I title the chapter, You're Running. And we use all sorts of mechanisms to run, don't we? Overworking, overparenting, booze, pills, overgaming, overshopping, over gambling, all sorts of things that we do to keep running from that tidal wave of all that pain and fears and bullshit beliefs we've been taught about ourselves, to keep running from that so that we don't have to face. And at some point you have to turn into it and you have to face it. And what you discover, it's the greatest gift of your life. Why? Because you finally, if you actually do the work of purging this stuff out of you, you begin to become lighter and clearer and stronger. Next question. Mary asks the question, can't you acknowledge and move on? If not, why? I actually have 2 questions coming up from her on the screen at the same time that I think offers a little bit of insight. Mary, I'm going to take them both at one time. Mary says, when people with your quote unquote title, Sven, I'm not sure what my title is. I've got 4 older brothers and an older sister that many times would say my title was butthead or something like that. I've got a girlfriend who would say my title is definitely pain in the ass. But anyway, when people with your quote unquote title say work through the pain, do you have to always have a meltdown? And then Mary follows up with, can't you acknowledge and move on? And if not, why? No, a meltdown isn't what you have to have in order to heal. No, absolutely not. I'm all in favor of not having the meltdown. When you have the meltdown is when all that shit inside of you has gotten so big that you can't keep it down anymore. So you ask the question, can't you just acknowledge and move on? Oh, you sure can. But that pain, all that bullshit you were taught about yourself, that you're no good, that you're unworthy, that you're unlovable, that you don't matter, that you're not worth defending, all that stuff, it's still in you. You can acknowledge it. Hey, pain. Hey, shitty messages I was taught about myself. Nice to see you, but I got to go. You can acknowledge it all you want. You can move forward all you want, but it will bite you in the ass later. The meltdown happens. I don't force a meltdown on my clients. I don't have to. I just go to where it is and we begin to sort of surgically excise those things and those messages and those pains. And it hurts momentarily in the minute, but there's no meltdown. Meltdown is what happens when you don't face it, when you acknowledge it and try to move forward without ever doing the work of flushing it out. So when I say doing the work through the pain, it doesn't require a meltdown. It just requires finally turning and facing into it. And it's going to be scary as fuck, which is why you've been running your whole life in the first place. It's going to be scary and it's going to kick your ass, but in the most wonderful ways, because what happens is it's like you've got a vault with all these memories that have emotional charges attached to them. And in order to empty out that vault, and that when we have the meltdown is when that vault is bursting and it's just, the vault door can't even keep it shut. And all those stored up painful memories and all the emotions attached to them, they just overwhelm us at times. So if you want to empty out the vault so that you're not being overwhelmed by your own shit from your own past, you got to go in there. You got to lift up the file marked age 7, and then bring out that box, and then bring out the box of all the memories and emotions that's marked the dickhead bullies in middle school. And you got to pull those out, and you got to carry them out, and you got to pull them out, look at them, find the origins, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that carrying them out, that reading them is heavy. But the more you get, it's out of the vault, the more you release those and you let those feelings and memories go free, you're lighter. So there's a momentary feeling of heaviness, but that can be an accelerated process. This isn't something that has to take forever. I'm not a fan of therapy having to take forever because I know it doesn't have to. All right. So no, it doesn't always require a meltdown. All right. Next question. Beck on Facebook asked a really interesting question. Do you think that trauma can be passed down through DNA, like from someone's war experience? All right, I'm going to be very blunt and tell you, I don't know shit about DNA. I don't. I think I had, a couple of bio classes in college at the Air Force Academy. I think I had a botany class and a fucking zoology class, whatever. But I don't know anything about DNA. I know you draw the little Punnett square and all that crap, but no, I don't know anything about DNA. So for me to comment on DNA just sounds stupider than I already sound. But I will say this. Do you think trauma can be passed down through DNA, like from someone's war experience? Through DNA, I really don't know because I don't know the science. However, I do know this. Do I believe someone's trauma can be passed down from one generation to the next? Oh, fuck yeah. Oh, fuck yeah. And I don't even mean in the DNA. I mean in the belief systems that mom believed about herself because her dad was, had shell shock from World War II, let's just say. Now, my parents were World War II age, so I'm just making up a story here. But if your mom had a father who, let's say, had shell shock and a lot of trauma from World War II and lived, after he came back from the war, lived in a shell and he came home to his, 3-year-old baby and mom was it. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Dad's war experience is definitely impacting his parent and their parenting, and therefore it is impacting his daughter. Maybe he's totally present, but he's totally absent. He is checked out. Well, that little child might be interpreting that experience, in fact, in all likelihood, is interpreting that experience of a checked out father as, I'm not important. My daddy doesn't love me. He doesn't want to do things with me, when it has nothing to do with her. But she's being taught that based on dad's war experience, not to mention mom and dad's experiences from their own childhood. So can it be passed down from generation? Oh, absolutely. We've all heard the phrase generational trauma, but this is what it is. It's where the shit that's unresolved from my past bleeds out or outright runs my parenting. And that's why I'm always telling people, dude, you want to change shit? You got to go in and change the past. Well, you can't change the past. Bullshit. You can't change the past. You can't, on one hand, you can't change the events that happen, but you can see them through different eyes. And I'm telling you, seeing your past through different eyes radically transforms the messages that you believe about yourself. All right.
I know you're not an expert, nor am I, but maybe the person was asking, can my depression be a genetic trait? There's less I can do about it under those conditions.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I know nothing about that. Can it be a genetic trait? I'll be very honest with you. Whether it can be or can't be, give me a crack at someone to remove the depression that isn't genetic, and it will change everything.
Or even if it is, you can work on it.
Oh, absolutely. You absolutely can. And Mary follows up with one more. Mary's getting one more shot today, and she says, I just feel like, why live in the past? 7 brothers and sisters, a mom and dad, and I loved my childhood. Then let me ask one simple question, Mary. If you had a great childhood, then why are these questions even coming up about, the pain of the past, and acknowledge it and move on? What the hell are you even referring to? If you loved your childhood and you had such a great childhood, then why would these questions about, acknowledge it and move on, why would they even be coming up? Furthermore, I've found that very often when people love their childhood doesn't necessarily mean they had a great childhood. That very often a child will choose to believe things or see only the good. Why? Because if they saw the bad, if they acknowledged the bad, if they allowed themselves to feel all the pain, it would shut them down. It would be so overwhelming, it would destroy them. And so it's not about living in the past, Mary. It's about healing the past. And that doesn't have to take forever. I'm not talking about living in it for the next 30 years of your life. I'm saying taking the time to heal it. I mean, it's no different from at work. Okay, so my girlfriend, she built an $80 million company in Manhattan. All right, she's president, primary shareholder since day one, 2,500 employees globally, factories around the world. If they had a problem go wrong with one of their factories or one of their fabric mills or what have you, if there was a problem, you go into the problem to determine what the origin sources of that problem are. Because if you don't do that, then any solution you create is going to be a half solution. It's like any problem. If let's say, I walk into the studio and I accidentally kick some wires and all of a sudden we don't have sound and the feed from, Zoom or from YouTube or whatever is just gone to shit. And Rob's thinking to himself, God damn it, Sven, I can't let you in here ever again. Can we just do you remotely? But he has to then go into the origins of the problem to determine what chords Sven kicked, what Sven broke this time, and what the damage is. But he has to determine origins before he can fix the problem. It's the same way with your family shit. It's the same way with your beliefs about yourself. If you believe you're a no good piece of shit, or if you believe whatever it is you believe, there's an origin for that. There's an origin. If you really want to fix it, rather than just sort of papering over it, you go into the origins. All right. Next question.
I got a question here from Badass 101.
All right.
It's from Bay, who asks, how do I start journaling or writing letters I don't send?
Fair enough. The mere fact that you are listening to this podcast taping, this live event that we are doing, seems to indicate that you probably have some things that trouble you, whether it's from the relationship you're in presently, or from your career, or from your distant, far, far past, whatever it is, right? So pick something. Pick one thing, even if it is from last week when your coworker said that really shitty thing and it hurt your feelings and it pissed you off. Start there. You don't even have to go back to 40 years ago. Just start with last week and write down the sequence of events. Let me tell you what I used to do, what we were trained to do in trauma counseling. And when I was working for an airline as their trauma counselor, what we do when I get somebody's, let's say a crew has come off of a flight where there was a wind shear, right? Or there was a smoke-filled cabin or something like that. The crew is required to be calm during the flight, but then after the flight, their own stuff comes out. Or when I was an emergency room chaplain at a level 1 trauma center, I spent a lot of time in the nurse's lounge, in the doctor's lounge. I spent a lot of time in the hallways afterwards, or in my office talking with crew who had been in on triple homicide, and they were brought into our emergency room, or burn victims, or whatever. Well, those people that experience the trauma as the workers, it's very, they're conditioned to sort of shut it down while they're working, but that doesn't mean they're not experiencing the trauma. And so what I do then when I have an opportunity to talk with them and listen to them is I first ask them to recall the experience. So this is what you can be doing in your journaling, okay? Or in your letter writing even. Recall the experience. In other words, write out the actual facts of what happened in that event when your coworker made that comment, or when your mother, pissed you off yet again, whatever it is. Write out the facts of the sequence of events of what happened. That's you telling the story. Now go down the next level and say, how did that feel? All right. So this gets tricky for some people because they don't know what feelings are. Google a list of feelings. You can Google it. There are lists of feelings. In fact, in one of the books that I recommend to listeners, the Sedona Method, depending on which edition you got, it's either pages 84 and 85 or 106 and 107. But there are 9 categories of feelings. Use that as a way to better define what you're feeling. All right. So you've written out the sequence of events, and now you're writing out, and I felt really angry when she said that. And the reason I was feeling angry is because she really hurt my feelings. Because it's like, where do you get off saying that, you dumb bitch? Fuck you. Like, your work is so much better than mine. Fuck off. I'm so mad at you right now. And that really hurt. And man, it reminds me of when my brother used to say shit just like that. He was such a pompous fuck. Whatever. You're writing it out. And then after you feel like you've gotten a bunch of feelings out, now come back up. You're coming back up to the level of telling the story. Tell the story again. Write out what happened. Yeah, I was just walking down the hallway, and he pulled me into his office, and he said, "Hey, you're an idiot, Sven." And it's like, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and so you're telling the story again, and then after you've written out the story again, then come out of it, move on with your day. And this is one simple method. So it's story, feelings, story, and then move on. And the more you keep coming back to it, the more you're flushing it out. You're reliving it. Have you ever gotten in a car accident and you had to tell like the first fucking 10 people all night? You called your best friend. You won't believe what happened to me. This head jerk off, and I hit a patch of ice, blah, 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 blah. And then you call up your mom and say, "Mom, you won't believe it, blah, blah, blah." And you got to tell the story. And the more you tell the story, then 4 days later, it's like, it's kind of in the past. But if you don't tell the story, it's like you get all these jumbled up emotions. That's all you're doing. And as far as writing a letter, if it's, let's just say this example of the coworker who hurt your feelings, write it out. "Dear so-and-so, you're a stink bomb and I don't like you and you smell and you're a bad person and it really hurt my feelings, and go fuck yourself. And why did you have to say that? I mean, why would you even say that? You know what? It didn't even just make me angry. It really it made me blue, melancholy for the next few days." Whatever, write it out. Write it out. Don't send it, burn it, flush it, stick it away in a file, whatever you want. Do that. Do it again the next day. Do it again a week later. And eventually, the more you do that, the more it's gone. It just floats away if you're doing the work of being deliberate about getting it out. Follow up?
Does that help you find your origins of these things, or that's a separate question?
That's a separate question. Okay, and see, this is where, so in my book, where I recommend Sedona method. Sedona is a very powerful tool once you can name your feelings. It's just simply a ritual of questions that you can cycle through to release the feelings. And if you have very powerfully charged feelings, it's like journaling on crack, except it doesn't require a pen and paper. It's a way of cycling through feelings and releasing them very, very quickly. So you're not stuck in it forever. And this can be a very powerful tool, especially when you're cycling into your past memories and all the emotional charges attached to those memories. It's a very quick way to unburden yourself of them. But identifying origins is a completely different thing. That's what my book is about. And that's what my counseling is about. On the counseling episodes of our show, this is a lightning round episode, but on the counseling episodes, what I'm taking people down into is to determine the origins of the messages they were taught to believe about themselves. Your myth system, your own personal myth system, where it came from. We just taped an episode of the show where we were talking with Trixie. Before we did this lightning round, we taped an episode with Trixie. And what we determined was that she flat out said she's in an abusive relationship. And, I just feel like once, he elevates his anger, or once he says something hurtful or whatever, I go into, my first response is feeling embarrassed and ashamed. And I start wondering, what did I do? What did I do? And so her default belief system is that I am doing something wrong and I am bad and I am ashamed of myself. And all we had to do was sort of pull on that thread a bit and track it all the way back. And what we determined in childhood was that her stepfather would punish her 10 times worse than he would punish his own kids. Her mother, Trixie's mother, wouldn't stand up for her. And Trixie's biological father was sort of a crazy man. And she was always afraid of him. So Trixie has fundamentally been conditioned to believe that she's not important, that she doesn't matter, that she's, to use her words, not worth a shit at all. I wonder what factors in then when her husband elevates his tone or starts saying mean things. I must be at fault. It must be me because I ain't worth a shit. So you can see how tracking back to the origin. And so once we tracked it back to the origins, and I said, well, why do you think your mom doesn't stand up to, your stepdad? Why do you think she never did? And, or never stood up to his ex, who was sort of torturing Trixie's mom and Trixie. Why do you think she never stood up? I think mom just didn't want to deal with it. And I think she felt like the fight wouldn't be worth it. I said, does that sound fucking familiar? It's just like you, Trixie. And she's like, oh my God, you're right. I'm just repeating the very pattern that I recognized and saw in childhood. Origins. All right, much more to come right after this short break.
Now here's one of Sven's clients talking about his experience with badass counseling.
What I wanted to be able to get across to other people is just how much you're able to deep dive into what's been going on in my life and help me figure out where and what caused that to help me solve and find those problems in my life to change where I'm going forward. None of the other therapists I went to with that, they try and help me figure out some other issues that may or may not be coming up, whereas you're able to dig down, find the core of what's going on. And I haven't been able to find that before. Just want to get more people aware of where you can go to in case you want your own therapy. And getting the hole in my love cup was one of the things that changed my life.
This show provides soul counseling intended to entertain and inform and is not medical advice. Now, back to the badass.
Hello, fine humans. It's good to have you back. I've got a question here from Andrea W. on TikTok. Why does manipulation feel more traumatizing than physical abuse? Well, I'm going to begin my answer with a caveat that is a personal assessment. There are some people who would say for them, physical abuse is worse or more traumatizing than manipulation. All right, so everyone's different. So let's just add that caveat first. However, for a person who experiences manipulation as more traumatizing than physical abuse, for those people, in what I've seen in my 30 years of counseling people, is that it's happening inside of you. It's not happening to you per se. That manipulation causes you to doubt yourself. It's as if the virus is no longer on my skin, like ringworm is on your skin. right? It's a topical thing. You take a topical ointment. I used to get ringworm when I was a kid, Ugh. Anyway, but manipulation is a virus that goes inside of you. It affects the operating system of the computer. So I'm just mixing the fuck out of my metaphors here. And so it's happening inside of you. And so you can't even see straight. You don't even trust yourself. And so it's much more insidious from the inside. All right, next question. Ursula on Facebook says, one of the reasons I try to teach my children to name their feelings, because being numb and shut down is no way to live. It's living as an incomplete person. Absolutely. And very often, feeling shut down or numb happens because you've been overwhelmed. The system has been overwhelmed by so many feelings. And so as a self-protection device, whether in children or adults, is that the system will basically shut down. So when I have a client saying, I just feel numb, it's because they've been overwhelmed and they have shut down. Somewhere inside of them, either volitionally or sort of accidentally, they've shut down all the feelings. They can't handle it. And so that's precisely where we go. We go right into it. We start pulling at some threads to find out what those feelings are, and we begin unpacking it. So even if it's just for that day, they're a little bit lighter, and we keep doing that. And I teach them how to do that on their own so that they can be a little bit lighter, and not have to shut down. All right, next question. Rob, you got one over there?
Well, I have an understanding of this question, and you may or may not want to keep it, but here's what I have from Rachel. Epiphany, my husband of 17 years with constant fighting and conflict that never gets resolved, sensory processing, emotionally unavailable, emotionless, extreme frustration. I now have a diagnosis. He is on the autism spectrum. What do I do now? I feel like such an a-hole.
And why do you feel like such an a-hole?
Well, it doesn't say, but I think because she did not understand where this was coming from, and now she does and feels like she was not sensitive enough to his condition.
Well, and the truth is the condition didn't exist for them, so to speak, before. He was doing things that you guys didn't have a diagnosis for. Is that accurate, Rob?
That's what she says.
Right. And here's the thing. Inside any situation, whatever the causes are, so in this case, your husband being on the spectrum, it doesn't invalidate your feelings. See, this is one of the trickiest things in all of relationships. Now, stay with me here, people. One of the single most difficult things, and I actually have a video that I just made on it a day or two ago. It's probably going up tomorrow. I've got it in the queue. One of the single most difficult things to do in any relationship, not just a love relationship, but any sort of relationship, is to simultaneously hold two persons' feelings simultaneously as valid. See, what so often happens, and this isn't just women and it isn't just men, though some people say, oh, that's women, fucking women, it's all, and some people say, oh man, once they get mad, it's all about them. Okay. Just because I have feelings doesn't mean that your feelings are now unimportant. Just because I've felt hurt doesn't mean that you're not allowed to have feelings, or that my feelings are totally right and yours are totally wrong. See, how we may recount the events of a scenario or a set of circumstances is different from what I am feeling about the events. Yes, they're tied together, but in the end, there's the events and then there's the feeling. And what we tend to do is we elevate our own feelings. Why? Because we're so inflated with feelings that we just insist on feeling it, and that you need to know how I feel, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but what about how they feel? And that's where relationships get hard. That's why I need to have a method, and you need to have a method for getting those feelings out of me so that I'm not so supercharged in the moment. So that way, when we're talking, we can both stay not just sort of reasonable in the moment, but I can be present to your feelings and hold up my feelings as important, and you can do likewise. But to hold two persons' feelings as valid simultaneously, if you have even some ability to do that, you have reached into master level relationships right there. You have reached into master level there. No lie. Because what it requires is you being deliberate. What it has required for you to get to this point is you, whether in therapy or journaling or whatever tools you use, getting out so much of your charged emotion. And it doesn't work to just stuff that down. That requires getting out, because if you've just been stuffing out down your emotion, then what's going to happen when somebody else is asserting how their feelings feel? Eventually you're going to reach the point where you scream, "What about me? What about my feelings? When do I matter?" And it'll be with anger, because inside of that anger is your righteous no. No, my feelings don't get squashed just because you have feelings. And inside of that no is the word I. That in that anger, in that no, you finally found the validation of your own I and your own feelings. And once you have that, now you're beginning. Now you can begin to flush out all those hypercharged emotions so that you can be present in the moment. And then you're a totally different person in your relationships. But holding two people's feelings as valid in any given moment, wow, that's seriously, I'm not even bullshitting you. That is master level shit. That's when you don't need your therapist anymore, really. At least when it comes to relationship shit, because you're on the path, and just keep working the path and flushing out your own hypercharged emotions.
Yeah,
Rob?
she follows up saying, rage, Sven. She believes that, she says, I believe we cannot work through this. I would argue that you can. With extra understanding is an extra opportunity to understand and to work on it.
As long as you have two people who are both motivated to do so.
Agreed.
Right. Both motivated and willing to do the work. Because, his or her mouth may be yammering, "Oh, I want to fix it. Oh, I love you. I love you. I love you." But are they actually, cracking the book and doing the work in the book? Are they actually going to therapy? Are they actually becoming introspective? And are they actually changing? Even if it's 1% a week, even if it's just 1%, even if it seems imperceptible, or not imperceptible totally, but largely, are you seeing change? Because if you're seeing change, there's hope. There is hope, because that's someone who gives a shit enough to do the work and to listen, or to calm themselves down, or to flush out their emotions in their own time so that they're not dumping them onto you. Rob?
Well, she said he's not open to it, which is not a good sign.
No. And at that point, the only thing that you guys have heard me say it a million times, and I talk about it in my book, There's a Hole in My Love Cup. I talk about it in my other book, Badass Wisdom. Change will not occur until the pain gets bad enough. And for some people, they're not going to change in this relationship. And very often what ultimately gets people to change, people who are quite hardened, have a hardened heart, or are extreme takers, is extreme pain born of loss. And you may not be that loss that is enough to trigger them. Although if you leave someone who is an extreme taker, or who has had a hardened heart, they'll want you back. Oh, and they'll sing all the sweetest songs. And they'll lure you back into the rocks, just like the sirens. And why? You think it's, oh, they love me. No. They want you back so that you'll keep pouring love into their love cup, make them king shit, right? You think it's that they want you. And what's funny is they'll do all the things that you've been telling them you wanted. They'll listen to you. They'll ask about your day. They'll want to spend time with you. They'll do all of those things. And then until maybe they won't. And they'll gradually slide back into the old ways. But the thing you got to ask yourself is this. If you're walking away from somebody and they're singing that siren song and they're saying all the right things and they're doing all the right things, the question you have to ask yourself is not a what or a why question, it's a when question. And the when question is, wait a minute, they're doing all the things that I've been wanting them to do forever. And sure, it feels good, but why now? Because if they know all those things that I've been telling them all the way along, that means they were listening. That means they heard me 7 years ago when I said, I need you to spend more time with me. That means they heard me 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, when I would say, would you just ask about my day? Would you just care about me for once? They heard you. But there was no incentive for them to change back then. But now there's incentive. Why? Because they stand to lose the person who's willing to pour all their love into their love cup. They're going to lose you, and they love having you make it all about them and filling their love cup. So now they're going to change because there's finally a pain point. I could lose one of my love sources. I don't want to do that. So now I'm going to change. They heard you the whole fucking time. But it doesn't matter. In the end, and we got on a little tangent here, but in the end, don't ever take a person back unless you have changed. Doesn't even matter if they've changed. because you need to assume they haven't, no matter what they're yammering out of their pie hole. If you haven't changed, it's going to slide right back into it. You want to know why? Because you have to have changed enough that you will hold them accountable at every turn when they begin to slide, if they begin to slide. You have to have changed enough that you're willing to stand up and not back down. See, part of the problem in the past was we allow shit. We allow people to treat us a certain way. So you have to have changed enough, found your strength, found your clarity, gotten out all those voices that said you ain't shit and you ain't worth standing up for. You have to have done that work so that you can catch them and catch them every single time, because otherwise you're expecting them to do all the heavy lifting, which really they should do, but no person is going to do all the heavy lifting, and you're going to have to hold your boundaries. Have you ever heard that phrase when a woman will say to a guy, and I used to hear this a lot, in the earlier years of my counseling, I'd hear women say, I want a guy who calls me out on my shit. I want a guy who calls me out on my shit. Yeah, sure, exactly. And that's what we're talking about here, this notion that I have to be willing to call you out on your shit when you're mistreating me. Of course, the side notion of the call me out on my shit is like, oh, it's my job to fucking police you. And I used to bitch when I was a kid, like in my 20s. I'd say, wait a minute. If women are so much more emotionally advanced, then why the fuck do I have to police you? If you're so emotionally advanced, why don't you police yourself? How does that fall on me? Petulant young snot. But the point is, I am responsible for maintaining my boundaries, and that means don't take someone back unless you have changed enough such that you're strong enough and aware enough to know when your boundaries are being violated, especially in the small things, because little things become big things. All right. Next question. Jane asks, well, Sven, why can't I send the letter when the divorce is final so that his ex that he went back to knows the truth of what he did to me? I don't like knowing that all he said about me is not true. You can send the letter. Jane, you want to send the letter? Send the fucking letter. Send the letter. I just tell people not to send the letter. I mean, you're adults. Do whatever the fuck you want. I'm just telling you, honestly, if you're sending a letter, you're sending it because you want to get something. You want something to happen. You're trying to control some sequence of events. And if you want to do it, do it. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. Who the fuck knows? I'm just trying to heal you. And if you want to just heal, you don't have to send any fucking letters. That's why, like, when people say, oh, my parents are dead, how can I ever heal from my childhood? Parents being living or dead, people outside of you have nothing to do with whether or not you heal. I can heal you whether your parents are alive or not. So, Jane, if you want to heal you, getting that sort of clearing of your name and his, him going back to his ex and all those things, that might feel good momentarily, but it's not going to fucking heal you. What's going to heal you is you getting out all your pain and your frustration, your anger, your rage, and all those things. You don't have to send the letters to do that. But if you want to send the letters, fuck, go for it. God bless you. Although you say so that you want to send the letter when the divorce is final so that his ex that he went back to knows the truth of what he did to me. Why do you give a shit what she thinks of you? That fundamentally this person that he's going back to owns you, as we would say in sports. She owns you. And she's probably not even trying to own you. She owns you because she has the power to make you miserable by what you think she knows about you. In a way, he owns you because you're worried about what he's telling someone. You're never going to have a relationship with her in all likelihood. And I mean, unless you're sharing kids. And even if you do, who gives a fuck what she thinks? Now, if you want to send a letter, I don't care. Send it. But you're giving a shit about what someone thinks of you, which means you are giving them power over you. And it's not even a person I'm betting you like. So what the fuck do you care? You're giving away your power.
Give me a percentage. What percentage of people who sent the letter are sorry?
Are sorry they sent it?
Yes.
Well, I tell you, as the person who sent those letters for years, I'm not sorry because like I hurt someone else. It's just like, oh God, did I do that? One of the things that was said about Dwight D. Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, was, and I think I have this origin right, it was Eisenhower, that he was a prolific drinker in his day, and that he would wake up the next morning and his first question would be, who did I offend last night? That sense of embarrassment. What's that embarrassment? Yeah, I send the letters, and then during it, my ex, she didn't respond, or she would be wishy-washy. It wouldn't work in getting her back, which is what I wanted. And so then it's just like, it was sort of embarrassing, but on the other hand, hey, fuck it, I put my truth out there. But after a while, looking back in retrospect, I don't even feel embarrassment anymore. It's like, hey, I was living my truth, whatever. But I realize now I didn't have to actually send them to heal myself, but I wasn't trying to heal myself. I was trying to get her back, thinking I couldn't be happy without her. So I was operating from a limited perspective. And, I was 27. I'm dumb enough now. Imagine how fucking stupid I was back then. Oh, right.
As my grandfather would say, even a fish wouldn't get into trouble if he kept his mouth shut.
Ah, wow. That's very eloquent, very wise, very astute, very zen. All right.
So back to Justin here, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Sven, is it possible I've journaled out a lot of my rage, but now I'm just journaling out a lot of sadness and disappointment?
Bingo.
The gym hasn't been hitting quite the same lately.
The gym.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that was helping him get it out.
Absolutely. And if trust me, as you guys have heard me say before, if you are journaling on childhood rage or job rage or anger or relationship stuff, man, going to the gym, do your journaling in the gym. I was in the gym this morning. I was journaling in between sets because you want to fucking conjure some great energy for some heavy lifting or some high intensity shit. Just conjure up whatever you're feeling angry about today. But you asked the question, is it possible basically that after I've gotten the rage out, there's a lot of sadness? Yeah, that's the point. That you just nailed it, brother. You just nailed it because remember, anger is by and large a secondary emotion, the primary emotion that precedes it. Even if it's just for a flash, what precedes anger is pain. Anger is a response to perceived pain, past pain, present pain, or perceived future pain. It's a defense mechanism. It's also a retaliatory mechanism. It is a response to pain. So the fact that you've gotten out the rage and are now dwelling in the sadness, that's brilliant. That's a bingo. That's a bingo. So now, you need to be journaling on all the pain inside because that means you're getting down there. That means you are doing more and more healing. So this is very, very, very good. What you are doing is working. Now keep pushing. Go deeper, push harder. Keep flushing that shit out of you. Katie asks, is this just relationship healing? No, we just happen to be on a bit of a relationship thread today. Usually it's a lot of childhood and a lot of relationship and career stuff. All right. I want to take just one or two more questions. All right. Let's see. What have we got here? How do you let go of all the fear so that you don't carry that baggage to other relationships? You remember what I just said literally about 2 minutes ago where I said that anger is a response to pain, past pain, present pain, future pain, right? If there's going to be future pain, what's going to drive the anger is also fear of that pain happening, right? So I'm going to put on the anger as a shield. If I'm dealing with past pain, if I'm angry about past pain, I'm carrying a sword. It's like I want to slash somebody who hurt me in the past. But if I'm dealing with potential future pain, it's more like a shield. I want to protect myself from it. So it's fear. So when you say, how do I let go of all the fear so that I'm not carrying that baggage into other relationships, that fear that you have is caused by past pain. You wouldn't have fear of future pain unless you had had pain in your past and you're worried about it happening again, right? So the way to reduce that fear is to go into that past pain and begin to write about it, journal about it. Write letters to the person who caused you that pain. And just so you're aware, if it was pain from a relationship, it was set up by the pain of your childhood. Guaranteed. Even if you came from a good home, you could have gotten some very powerful messages, not just about your own worth, but how you're supposed to function in a relationship, which someone might have exploited, even if the person wasn't necessarily a bad person. All right. But that pain has to come out because the more that pain is out, the less you're afraid of it happening in the future. And I want to share with you something. I had a chance to have a session with a client that I very much have enjoyed over the last, 3-4 years. And I see her, maybe once a year. I think it'd been a year and 2 months since I had seen her last. And we had a session this past week. Lovely person, lovely, salty. She would call herself a salty broad, her words, and love her to death. But she said one of the all-time quintessential statements I have ever heard from a client in 30 years of counseling. after we had worked together for just a couple of months. And she had done all the work that I asked, and she had opened up. She didn't resist. And we did some massive healing very, very quickly from some severe childhood trauma. And she's a parent as well. And she made the comment, we had worked together for a couple months. Then she took like a month away, and then she came back for a checkup. And I said, how's it going? And she said, Sven, with my employees, it's so much better. And with my own kids, da, 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 da. And she says, you know what it is, Sven? Here's the statement she said. She said, I'm more vulnerable, but I feel less vulnerable. She's walking through life now because she healed the pain of the past. She's able to put herself out there. What I talk about in the book, what I refer to as radical honesty versus brutal honesty, which I'm not a fan of. Radical honesty, where I can just live out there. I can live inside out for the most part. She's being more vulnerable. She's not afraid to expose and show her dreams, her loves, her aspirations, her interests, even some of her past pain. She's not afraid of that. So she can be more vulnerable in her friendships or with her employees or with her family or with her lover. And yet she feels less vulnerable. Well, that's power, folks. Where you're no longer afraid of being vulnerable, that your own sense of worth, your own sense of self-love, your own sense of happiness, your own sense of groundedness in your own self are so strong that even when you're being more vulnerable, you feel less vulnerable. That's the purpose of all this work. That's the purpose of all of this, to begin to live as your most authentic self and to feel less and less afraid in doing so. Well, fine people, we may do one more after this, but this one is a wrap. This has been a great lightning round. I appreciate everyone's questions. We got on a relationship thread, which is great because everyone has them, everyone gets into them, and we always have questions, and there are always new levels and new things that come up. So I want to thank you for all your questions. Rob, any closing thoughts?
Always something to learn. I'm always glad to hear what we have to say.
I'm always glad to hear what people's questions are. It's just so fascinating. And I learn. I'm constantly learning. So this is fantastic for me and new ways to help other people by you guys' questions and by your comments. So thank you guys. Really, you're helping other people, whether you're aware of it or not. You really are. And Rob and Casey and I, we see this all the time. We'll get comments from people saying, oh, you had Ellie on the show. And when she was saying blah, 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 or, when you had that couple on the show back in March, Sven, and you had the husband and the wife, boy, it's just what you were singing my tune and all this stuff. So your questions and your comments are helping others, people. So thank you for that. That's about it. On behalf of KC, on behalf of Rob the Rocket, I am Sven Erlinson. This is the Badass Counseling Show. Have a kick-ass day.
The Badass Counseling Show is strictly copyrighted. No copies may be made without the express written consent of the Badass Counseling Show, LLC. The Badass Counseling Show is produced by Karen Camparelli and Robert H. Friedman. Executive producer Sven Erlinson. Original music by two-time Emmy Award-winning composer Trevor Morris. Have a kick-ass day.